So, to put this into context, Persona 5 Royal took me approximately 80 hours to beat and get the Platinum Trophy. In that 80 hours, I experienced a multitude of things from the story, gameplay, graphics, music, and world building. Now, I played the original Persona 5, and there are a good amount of differences, but my plan when I review this game is I want to just take Persona 5 Royal and let it be its own game, not think about, any of the differences from Persona 5. So I have a lot to actually talk about with this game, so I'm going to just cut the introduction short and let's get Persona 5 Royal added to my game list. From a high level, Persona 5 Royal takes on a very familiar underdog story. The protagonist, and really many of the characters, have some big issues. The main character that you get to play as, Joker, has been labeled as a criminal who assaults people, gets expelled from his school, and moved to live in Tokyo in an attic above a coffee shop. Now, while this may be some teenagers' dreams, Joker is not as into it. I think. He really is the silent protagonist type, so while others always seem outraged, Joker just has a, yeah, I guess vibe to it, which I actually dig. Now, all of that is just the start. From here, you go on to your new school, and on your first day, wouldn't you know it, you end up super late. This is of course because you were transported to a different dimension, known as Palace, with this guy you ran into, and you get to meet the gym teacher. Turns out he thinks the school is his castle and he's a king. Now this is just an introduction to some of the weirdness in the story, but in the universe it all does make sense, and I really love it. You get to traverse different palaces ruled by different people who have less than ideal moral compasses, and your goal is to steal the treasure in this palace. Along the way are a lot of great story points. You get to dive into what made each of these bad people the way they are, and you also explore the background of each of the newest characters of your team. Of course, this isn't the only way you get to know people. When you're not in a palace, the world is your oyster. This is where some of the true connections and story beats can occur. There's the items between each palace where you try to find new targets, deal with the reaction to your last one. These are really interesting as there's usually a celebration of the newest member of your crew, the Phantom Thieves. It's not all group activities though, you can have one-on-one moments with a whole host of characters, called confidants, including a doctor, the coffee shop owner Sojiro, and of course other members of the Phantom Thieves. These story moments dive deep into your confidant's background, frequently finding a negative figure in their life that they are trying to more or less rebel against. I find these story sessions with the confidants to be honestly really great. I love the depth that each character has and how the characters are able to grow, and it feels like you as Joker are growing with them. There's a lot to the stories I've talked about, from taking on the targets in their palaces to just hanging out with friends and allies. I'm going to give the story 98 points. Just like with the story, there are two types of gameplay you'll face in Persona 5 Royal. These two types revolve around what happens in the palaces and what happens in your day-to-day life. In the palaces, you and your friends are the Phantom Thieves, a group trying to steal the heart of the palace's ruler in the form of a treasure. As part of this, you're going to explore the palace and solve puzzles. Typically, they end up being movement-based puzzles, or really simple, press a switch here and there type of puzzles, which aren't terribly exciting, but they're done pretty well in this game. The part of the palace that I really love though is the combat. Now, I am a big fan of turn-based combat when done right, and this game does it right. The basics, of course, are there, where between your group of up to 4 players in the party alternate with the enemy party taking turns attacking, healing, inflicting status effects, etc. But this combat system integrates some great items. First is the quote-unquote magic system in the game. Now, most games just let the player cast spells, but in this game you use what are called personas to attack with. The cast of characters only has one persona they can use at a time, but the player character Joker is able to hold multiple. This brings a lot of strategy into the game, as you can either try to have one or two super powerful personas that maybe don't cover every enemy weakness, or you can have a whole fleet of personas that cover all weaknesses, but maybe aren't as strong overall. And then in each fight, which partners do you want in your 4-player party? Now, these are only a couple of the options you can choose from in Persona 5 Royal when it comes to the persona system. The other aspects of combat can get pretty granular, but in fun ways. You can equip different guns or other weapons to make your team stronger. You can also get closer to your friends, as I mentioned previously. and this gives new abilities that affect battle as well. There's a lot to palace handling, including the Palace of Mementos. Mementos is basically a dungeon you can explore where you get to go deeper and deeper every time you beat a boss when you're in between the palace targets. This is a good place to try and gain some extra levels if you're starting to fall behind, and the combat of course is the same as in the normal palaces. Back to the normal world, gameplay is rapidly different. The gameplay here is in short menuing. You go in menus to decide what to buy, where to hang out, what to say to people, and in some cases even who to hang out with. But interestingly enough, this never got old for me. I think this ties to some of the other things I've talked about in this game, mostly in the story section, but talking about it in terms of gameplay, I think it's interesting the different options you're given, and how all the menus interact with one another. The pause menu is crazy detailed and lets you get down into your party and your persona lineup in a way that's just really fluid. The phone is easy to navigate, read messages from your friends. Purchasing things literally anywhere is super easy and intuitive. You also get to walk around all different districts of Tokyo, such as Shibuya or Shinjuku, and this is where you can find different shops to go to or people to talk to. Of course, you can also intuitively use a map in-game to fast travel to these different locations after you've been to them once. Now, one thing I haven't mentioned yet is the skill system. This really only affects the social part of the world and not the palaces, as you need skills such as guts and charm more in the real world. There are tons of things you can do to get these skills up, from reading books to eating food at a local diner. These skills have interesting effects as well. For example, you get exams once a semester in school, and your knowledge stat directly correlates with how well you do on the exam. You might not be able to talk to certain people until your charm skill is up high enough, and so on. I think it's really interesting and gives you more to do during day-to-day life in the normal world. Just like with the story, there really is a lot to the gameplay side of Persona 5 Royal, and I want to give all of that 89 points. From the opening moments of this game, I was impressed with the graphics. In some other games I've played recently, the cartoony style was good but not great, but as soon as I jumped into Persona 5 Royal, I knew this was going to be worth talking about. There are some animated cutscenes that look like they popped out of any great anime studio that are out there today, and I definitely enjoyed watching them. On the other side is the graphics you see during most of the game, which is 3D graphics but extremely stylized. Everything is meant to pop out at you for easy interaction. I mentioned the pause menu earlier. It's weird that I keep going on about a pause menu, but honestly, this is arguably one of the best pause menus I've ever seen. It looks great and interacting with it feels great all in one. The characters in this game all look great, although there is a heavy dose of important character syndrome, where all the characters in a room look the same, except for the important characters. That's how I could tell in the first couple hours in the game who I would want to keep an eye on throughout the whole playthrough. The cities are also well designed in ways that make sense. I wouldn't have to use the map for every little thing. Eventually I learned the streets because they were laid out in, for the most part, a way that made sense. Then we get to the palaces in the game. All of them are designed around a specific reality that the target feels is true. I used the example earlier where a teacher thought the school was his castle, so his palace was a castle. Each palace is different and designed in really creative ways. One other palace I'll mention is a museum with different art all across the walls. I was really just overall impressed with the level of detail and quality that went into the graphics of Persona 5 Royal. Besides the graphics, I want to take this moment to talk about the music. Folks, the music is bangin'! I seriously spend time listening to this music while I work on other stuff, and sometimes if I'm at a particularly grindy part of a game, I'll put it on to listen to. There are numerous tracks to help look at each location. The best music in my opinion in this game is the battle music. It gets you really hyped up to be in the battle and make moves. Something really impressive to me with the audio is how the menu sound change, and almost ties into the track. In the battle, when you go through the menu, you get kind of a think noise, and I swear it seems higher during the battle when the music is a little bit higher compared to the pause menu or in real world gameplay. I find it interesting, and either way, I find the music very, very good. Talking through the graphics and the music, they are both great and important pieces of this game. Because of that, I'm going to give them 82 points. One last shorter thing I want to touch on with Persona 5 Royal is the world building. I've touched on it in bits and pieces in the sections above, but want to specifically call it out here. The Tokyo you play in this game is amazing, as are all of the palaces. The game works really hard to convince you of this world. There are people on the train or in school talking about things related to the Phantom Thieves or things going on in the world otherwise. There are all sorts of shops down the streets in Shibuya that also make sense. The game also reiterates frequently how palaces exist and why the Phantom Thieves are trying to steal treasure for the palaces, which is for justice. The game also, however, brings up stuff like mob bosses and corrupt politicians in the real world, and the effect that having people like that can have on society and what it means in the long run. It also comments on the judicial system and how easy it was for Joker to be labeled as an assaulter and to be expelled from school. The world just feels alive, and considering how much there is to do in this game, I'm not surprised, but it's just a very welcome feeling. I'm going to give world building 68 points. So 80 hours later, and the Platinum Trophy for Persona 5 Royal was mine. I finished the story, and I really just kind of sat down and thought about the game as a whole. You know, I mentioned earlier I played the original Persona 5 and loved it, and this game just added to that with new content. But, you know, like I said before, this game I'm treating for this review as just its own entity. I'm not doing the compare and contrast. Maybe that's something I'll do later in a different video. If you're interested in that, let me know in the comments. But, you know, I think this game was a really great whole experience, and I'm glad I got to play it and talk about it so much. So with the story at 98 points, gameplay at 89 points, the graphics and music combined are 82 points, and world building I gave 68 points. The total for this game is 337 points. This game is now third on my game list out of 30 games. I've hit 30 games on this list, only below the first two Paper Mario games. I greatly enjoyed this game and absolutely give a recommendation to, very least, you know, I say this all the time, very least play it, please, play it and get through it all the way through. You know, completing the trophies for this game, if you're into trophy collecting, it's not too hard, I think, for this game, so I think it's something you can kind of get through along the way as well. It's a pretty fun goal, I think. Persona 5 Royal is now on my game list, and I thank you for watching me do so. If you like what I'm doing on this channel, drop a like and subscribe to see more content here on YouTube. You know, if there's any games you want to see me go through, play, review, you know, leave a comment or reach out to me on Twitter, Twitter is down in the description down below. Otherwise, thank you so much and have a good one.